Well, Iran was pretty deft. They were pretty slick with what they pulled off here. And we're going to break it down a little bit. Okay, so like I said, the ceasefire wasn't really in Iran's interests. It seems as if they kind of pressured Trump to accept their 10 points. And the most important of which was Israel will stop bombing Lebanon. Now, Israel had no communication in these arrangements, did not agree to that. And even once it went through, they're like, hell no, we are not doing that. We are not stopping bombing Lebanon because of their proxy, their Hezbollah. And additionally, the agreement said that the Strait of Hormuz, that Iran would now control it, not de facto by threats from the mainland Iran where they could launch rockets and drones and potentially blow up ships. No, they're saying now we get to charge a $2 million per ship fee for any ship that passes through. And the other thing that they pulled off there is they're not going to allow it to be paid in US dollars. It needs to be paid in either the Chinese currency or apparently now Bitcoin, crypto. And this is a way to further undermine the American petrodollar and continue to leverage their power in the region, right? So they've used this potential ceasefire very much to their advantage because they know, right? Hezbollah and Israel have been in a war with one another since, I think, 82. They're a very anti-Israeli military force. They're pretty radical. They're committed to the end of the Israeli state. I think they're even like kind of more radical than even Hamas. They really want to get rid of Israel. That's something they've stated and reinforced. Now, they've adapted their PR over the years, but that's still pretty much one of their main tenets. And Iran knew that there's no way that Israel was just going to be like, all right, it's peace. You know, what was going to have to happen from that was that the United States was going to have to get involved and restrain Israel from continuing their bombing campaign in Lebanon. And Israel had, like I said, absolutely no interest in doing that whatsoever. So let's break into this a little bit. This is from the Times of Israel. Now, immediately following the ceasefire, this was, literally it was hours. Hours after the ceasefire was announced, Israel launched its biggest attack yet into Hezbollah. Into Lebanon, into Beirut, which is like, I think their capital city, and just leveled the place. Killed like hundreds of civilians, wounded thousands others. Just absolutely was making it 100% crystal clear to everyone involved that they are not capitulating with this ceasefire. They are not on board at all. So let's read this article from the Times of Israel, and we'll talk about this a little bit here. IDF, Israeli Defense Force, if you don't know, launched largest airstrikes yet on Hezbollah. Trump, Iran truce doesn't cover Lebanon. Now, this is something that has been happening with the White House and Pakistan and Iran and Israel. Everyone's saying something different. Initially, when those 10 points were agreed to, one of which was that Israel will cease attacking Lebanon, Trump did initially agree to this. Now, Vance and others have come out and said that that's not true. We never agreed to that. There was a miscommunication, but I think it was the Pakistani prime minister who was like, you did. You absolutely did. Israel was not included in these conversations at all, and they had no interest in following up, despite the fact that there was all this contradiction. There was contradiction coming from the White House saying that they hadn't agreed. Pakistan says they did agree. Israel made it very clear that they did not agree to any of it. The Israeli Air Force on Wednesday carried out its largest wave of airstrikes yet against Hezbollah, the military said, after announcing that it would keep fighting the Iran-backed terror group in Lebanon, despite 2-week ceasefire with Tehran that came into place hours earlier. The Prime Minister of Pakistan, who mediated between the U.S. and Iran, declared in his post announcing the 2-week ceasefire overnight, Wednesday and Thursday, said that it would cover Lebanon as well. Iran said the same, while Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's office insisted that Israel's strikes against Hezbollah would continue. So what ended up happening because of that, Iran took that as a violation of the ceasefire. They're like, okay, we agreed. We said that there would be a ceasefire based on these terms. You, the President of the United States, Donald Trump, and your office agreed to all the terms. So you broke the ceasefire. fuck you, the Strait of Hormuz is closed again. Now, this went back and forth. This was yesterday. All the information coming out of the Strait of Hormuz, whether it was the actual satellite data of which boats were coming through the strait, or like the Iranian government itself, really anyone on the ground was saying, yes, the strait is closed because, Israel broke the ceasefire we agreed upon. Well, the White House and like Caroline Leavitt were like, no, that's not true. It's open. Yet all the evidence was proving that it wasn't. So what's interesting about this, right, is like we talked about this the other day. What is potentially on the table here for Iran is that they will control the Strait of Hormuz, right? It's that little weird kind of horn, like kind of waterway just outside the Persian Gulf, where like 20% or 30% of all the world's oil goes through. And it's really easy for Iran to control it because of its odd geographical shape, in that Iran can just from the mainland just launch rockets or drones. Even guys like on a truck with like a rocket launcher can hit these oil ships. And like I said, they're basically floating bombs. They're just filled with fuel, so they'll go up like easy. So they're very ripe targets, and they move incredibly slowly. These oil ships go like, it's something like 5 knots. They barely move. So they're just ripe, juicy, sitting targets, right? Very easy for Iran to enforce this shutting down of the strait. So what the Trump administration, despite what they say, what they agreed to was that Iran will control it, and then we'll get a $2 million per ship fee, basically a toll. We'll charge them a toll, which they will split with Oman. Now, I think Oman said that they don't want the money or whatever, but that was part of the agreement. Now, this is from a podcast from J.P. Morgan, the financial institution. And this guy is, what's his name? Michael something? Michael Kembalist. He's like the chairman of market investment strategy for J.P. Morgan. That's not relevant. What is relevant is the information that he's going to share with us about what would happen if this toll was enacted in the way that Iran wants it to be, right? Okay, remember what I said, $2 million per ship, every single ship that goes through the strait. That's what actually Trump agreed to. Maybe he didn't mean to, maybe he thought he could finesse them out of it, but technically that is the terms that he agreed to.
One proposal I saw from Iran was that they would charge vessels $2 million each, which would, if you think about 140 vessels per day, 365 days a year, that would amount to $100 billion in revenues. Now, obviously, that seems preposterous, but think about this.
Did you all catch that? $100 billion a year Iran would get if they were able to enact this toll. $100 billion a year. Now, he shows here, and I think he's going to go on to say it, but it's worth pointing out that similar waterways where it's kind of controlled by maybe an autocratic state or just a powerful state that wants to create a stream of revenue for themselves, like you can kind of see it's pretty small there, but Panama Canal gets for a year $5.7 billion. The Suez Canal gets 10. St. Lawrence Seaway gets 86 million. And then there's a few others that get, tens of millions of dollars. But this would effectively make Iran one of the wealthiest countries in the Middle East, even more than the United Arab Emirates. So we essentially spent somewhere between like $50 and $70 billion to make our enemy way stronger. Like now, if this goes through, obviously, this is all tenuous. Everything's up in the air. The situation changes by the minute. But if this were to go through, essentially, Trump's war and Israel's war, what it did was make Iran incredibly wealthy. Good work, guys.
Even if Iran only charged $2 million to the 2,000 or 3,000 commercial vessels which are currently stranded in the Gulf, that would raise on its own, on that one-time basis, $4 to $6 billion, which would match or exceed the annual toll revenues from the largest canals in the world. Panama Canal, the Suez Canal, the St. Lawrence Seaway, the Bosphorus and the Dardanelles. We have a little table in the piece that goes through it. So it will be interesting to see whether Iran, at least with respect to the Strait, ends up with a more advantageous economic relationship with the world than when it started.
What did we win? Now, this is something that Nick Fuentes covered on his show last night, but it was something that I saw immediately as well. Now, if you go to Twitter and you follow any of these like committed MAGA guys who, like, no matter what the president does, it's always 5D chess. It's always the best thing ever. He's always the greatest, smartest, best diplomat, one of a kind, the best who ever did it. They were saying, like, you see, you panicans, you guys were worried about this war. Look at our commander-in-chief. He figured it out. He finessed them. He got them in there. What did he accomplish? I'm just saying this objectively. Personally, subjectively, I'm glad it's over. Because there was only two places this could go. Troops on the ground, which would be an absolute disaster, as we saw by that one operation where they're potentially maybe trying to get the nuclear material, right? Whatever happened there with the downed fighter pilot, it's very, very, very cloudy as to what the truth was. But that went terribly. And so it would be that times, 10,000. All our youngest men going back, just same thing, waves and waves of young guys dying for a cause that isn't theirs, for a cause that doesn't benefit them or the country that they love, right? PTSD and horrific things, or nuclear weapons, something that hasn't been done since 1945 with Japan, right? And is still pretty criticized by a lot of different people. Not everybody in the world, but many people criticize that action. You did vaporize like tens of thousands of civilians in an instant. I get it. I'm not here to litigate that, but I'm just saying. So that's where it was going to go. And I think, as crazy as Trump has appeared and as poorly as he's handled this presidency, I think he was aware of that. I think he realized he's backed into a corner. There's no way out. Like, there are suggestions that what he was doing here with these kind of wacky tweets was what's called madman theory, where it's like, if you bluff hard enough, then the enemy may think you're crazy enough to actually nuke Tehran. Maybe that's what was going on. But when I hear Trump speak, when I watch like anything, he's not the same guy. Maybe he's just getting old. But to me, what I read was that he looked panicked. He looked very panicked. He did not seem like, the guy who was sharp and in control, the alpha dominant guy who doesn't take any shit. He looked like he didn't know what the hell he was doing and how to get out of this. He was bluffing every day. Oh, we won, greatest victory. Bet, we got a new regime in there that's like kinder and cuddlier, and none of that's true at all. It seems like Trump's taken the L. Now he's bluffing, and there's a lot of back and forth going on, and even stuff that's happening today. Strategically, from the United States perspective, he can't allow the Strait to be controlled by Iran in that way. Now, maybe they'll figure out a deal that's more manageable, but you can't give them an extra $100 billion a year after this war. I mean, look, it looks like they're within their rights to do it, but I know one country that is not going to allow that to pass by, and they happen to be rather influential in our foreign policy and in our domestic policy as well, but they have their ambitions in the region, if you will. This deal is not just about money.
Through this just to show you exactly how much control they have over the Straits of Hormuz, so you can actually hear it out. Hamad Hosseini, he's a spokesperson for the Iranian Oil and Gas Exporters Union, told the Financial Times Iran wanted to collect toll fees from any tanker passing and to assess each ship. Quote, Iran needs to monitor what goes in and out of the strait to ensure these 2 weeks aren't used for transferring weapons. Everything can pass through, but the procedure will take time for each vessel, and Iran is not in a rush. So this is not just charging a fee. This is like being boarded by the Coast Guard, some sort of customs union. And we're not talking about, in their necessarily just in their territorial waters. We're talking about in a previously free and open international shipping corridor, where basically it's now like here in the Potomac River, where if you have a boat and this coast, they're like, oh, where's your license? Can we see the cargo list? What do you have on board? Now let me continue. They also say that it is halting passage of the oil tankers.
Just like absorb that. Right? Absorb what that really means, right? It's like if we didn't start this war, we would have been in a much better position, right? Like nothing said and done. Like I said, this situation, who knows? While I've been streaming, there could have been some breaking development. I don't know. But if you look at this situation objectively, the Strait of Hormuz was just that, a strait where a lot of shipping went through. No one controlled it. No one charged a fee. It was just a way for, especially the Eastern Hemisphere to get a lot of its energy. But it affects the global economy. It affects global fuel prices, fertilizer, natural gas, all that stuff. It was just a waterway. Now it's a toll booth. not only that, the manifests of each ship needs to be transmitted to Iran, and Iran now has boarding rights of every boat that goes through there. All this could have been avoided if we just didn't start the war. Now Iran is going to be richer and more powerful, and basically the authority of this very crucial waterway based on the outcome of this war. That's what this war got us. It cost us $70 billion, estimates vary, 13 American lives, thousands of Iranian lives, hundreds of Israeli lives, Lebanese, all these lives. And now the enemy, the target of this war, is stronger, richer, and now is posturing to be like a global power. They already have like a far better infrastructure than pretty much every country in the region because of all the sanctions that have been put on them for years and years, right? I know it goes back to at least the Obama administration, probably further, but definitely the Obama administration. So they've had to adjust their entire economy and their entire country to become self-sufficient because they couldn't really trade with the world. And now we're going to get them $100 billion extra a year, and they have control. They have military control over the strait. That's what this war accomplished. Spin that, MAGA guys. Spin that, fucking Benny Johnson. Spin this now. It's crazy. It's absolutely fucking nuts, man.
In response into the Israeli strikes on Lebanon, but before that, any tanker passing must send, exactly as I said, a cargo listing that informs them of what is on board. Iran will then inform them of the toll to be paid. He said that the tariff is now $1 per barrel of oil, adding that empty tankers may be allowed to pass freely. Once the email arrives and Iran completes its assessment, vessels will be given a few seconds to pay in Bitcoin, ensuring that they can't be traced or confiscated due to sanctions. The tankers on the Gulf have received a radio broadcast saying they will be targeted with military strikes unless they first gain approval from Iranian authority. That is total and complete control of the Strait of Hormuz.
Think about what this war cost us, right? Not just that, it's like kind of good for Iran, right? In a way, although it is just going to raise global fuel prices probably forever because there's an extra $2 million per boat you have to incorporate or whatever the, whatever the tariff works out to. But now we look weak. The United States looks weak. Now we're going to flex on China? They're going to be like, with what? Well, you just like depleted like all your munitions. Like, what are you going to do? We're taking Taiwan. Go fuck yourself. Like, the amount of like political capital this cost us, the alienation of our allies. It's like when Trump was coming up, right? When it was Trump won and all the liberals were, freaking out about how, he embarrasses the nation and what this is going to do for our global reputation. I never gave a shit about any of that, but looks like they were kind of right. I mean, when this type of diplomacy, right, and you do it at the barrel of a gun all the time, but you lose. What does that say about you? What does that say about us? What does that say about the future of this country? It doesn't say it. It doesn't say it does not predict anything positive. And I fail to see any interpretation of this war that isn't a complete disaster, that isn't an unmitigated, like across the board disaster. Like, what did we benefit from this complete, ignorant, like stupid, premature, poorly planned operation? And there was a piece apparently. Now I think a lot of the administration might be running might be running damage control for their own political futures. But there was a piece in the New York Times that came out a few days ago that was essentially saying Israel, Bibi Netanyahu sat down and basically primed Trump on this war and predicted how it would go, that it would be just like Venezuela. You do that strike on the Ayatollah, he's dead, and then an uprising will follow, and you won't have to do much more than that. And everybody in the cabinet, even guys like Marco Rubio, this war hawk, even guys like that, this like completely Zionist-owned war hawk idiot, even he was like, that's ridiculous. That just won't happen. Nobody thought it would happen, and Trump went ahead and did it anyway. And there's lots of, you could speculate as to the reasons. I think, $100 million from Mary Matelson this time around probably had something to do with it. Whatever Mark Levin's position in the administration is, the way he can like physically bully the president, who is one of these guys who absolutely does not put up with stuff like that. Like, there's obviously a dynamic going on here with Israel, whether it's just financial leverage or it is something tied in with the Epstein files, who knows? But they have something on this guy who is able, I mean, it's reasonable to speculate that they have something on this guy who were able to pressure him into a war that, you know, completely an unwinnable. Everyone, even around you, even these people, all these sycophants around you, even they were saying this is unrealistic, this will not happen, and he went ahead and did it anyway. I really don't even think, like I said, the best strategists in the world imagine that Iran would then take this leverage, take this moment in history to enrich themselves with a toll. It's brilliant on their part, but I don't think anyone even saw that coming. It was very obvious, and it's something that has been talked about for years and years. It wasn't something that they just invented on the fly, was that they could shut down the Strait of Hormuz, which would have the effect it's having, and that was something that was, you know, evident just by the very nature of that geography, of their strategy, of how much leverage do they really have. They have that choke point. They're going to use it. Obviously, why wouldn't they? That's just pure like game theory. And then, yeah, they did. And now they have a toll. And it's like, wow, fucking dropped the ball. Doesn't even begin to cover it. Dropped the ball, doesn't even begin to cover it. Okay, so what's interesting, like I said, is that Trump agreed to this, but didn't agree to it, right? This is the duality of Trump. You know, everything is true the second I say it. Nothing is not true. It's just, you know. So he says this is his truth. I think I'm on Truth Social. I don't know, but I get all the updates on Twitter anyway, so I don't really need to. There are reports that Iran is charging fees to tankers going through the Hormuz Strait. They better not be, and if they are, they better stop now. President Donald J. Trump. What are we doing, folks? Like, honestly, like, what are we doing? Like, he agreed. Like, I think the truth of the matter is, like I said, I think what really happened here, Trump knew that he was cornered. Trump knew that there was no way out of this. And so he just agreed and figured he could kind of finesse the bullshit out of him. If this stands, right, it's like, okay, so the point of this war was to dethrone the regime, stop their nuclear program, and even when it got more extreme was for them to get rid of their ballistic missiles. Regime, very much intact. Ballistic missiles, very much intact. Richer, more powerful, and they can continue to do the nuclear program that was the end all be all. That's what this war was about. That's what the first war was about. I mean, that's what we've been hearing about Iran. They're, 2 weeks away from a nuclear bomb since the 90s. Been hearing that exact story. So none of that was accomplished, and yet Trump did agree to it.